So hello there, YouTubes. I thought I would try to shoot a response here to Karen to Be Serious, who had posted up a video that's titled, "What is Heidegger saying about death exactly?" I don't want to claim in any way to be an expert on Heidegger. I do think Heidegger is notoriously difficult. What I would want to say is, I have both translations. I got the sort of classic translation and then the more recent one by Joan Stambaum. And I'll see if I can say at least a couple things here about what Heidegger's doing in this sort of classic text. As best that I understand it, okay? So people feel free to correct and revise as needed or necessary. I think that, Heidegger's being in time is a fundamental ontology. It's an existential analytic of Dasein. Now, when he says it's an analytic of Dasein, he is trying to interrogate that being whose being is in question. And the being whose being is in question is you. I mean, you are Dasein. Dasein, the word, it ambiguously means being here, being there. And it's you are that being who is cleared to be the there here. When I say be the there here, it's there is always a there that's co-disclosed along with the here of your body, and it's more than an embodiment. Now, it has historicity, and this is part of the issue for Heidegger, but we'll get to that in a second. Heidegger wants to really be very specific about the difference between Dasein's being and the kind of being of non-Dasein beings. So when we're talking about the kind of being of non-Dasein beings, and we're not talking about animals or living organisms, but things and objects, there is, the being of this pen for Heidegger is, there's really two kinds of being. By that I mean two ways in which its being shows itself to Dasein. One would be what's called readiness to hand. Now, readiness to hand is the classic translation. Stambaum translates it as at-handedness. So I think that makes it a little confusing, although this is probably more right to, I guess, German, but I think we understand here. When he says, when Stambaum it translated as at-handedness, or what is traditionally readiness to hand, it means that the entity that's being is a with which, in order to, for the sake of which. And so it's part of an equipmental totality that is projected upon Dasein's everyday concerns and dealings. And so it's when the tool breaks down that, and his example is the famous example of the broken hammer. I look down and I can see that the hammer is unserviceable to my tasks or to my projects, and then its unserviceability gets disclosed to me. And for Heidegger, this is like a major revelation, that the object's being as a tool, and this is the first clue into Dasein's being as temporality. See, I mean, Dasein is being in the world, and to say Dasein is being in the world, and being in the world is all in hyphens, and it means it's like a whole expression, and it has to do with thrownness and the way that one emerges in everydayness in Das Man, or the they self, right? And how, I guess, death. Geez, I'm all over the place here. I mean, death is the principle of individuation for Heidegger. It's death which calls me out of my lostness in Das Man, or my lostness in the they self, and it pulls me out of everydayness into a sort of strange and uncanny capacity to be resolute in an anticipatoriness. So I become anticipatory. I take on an anticipatory resoluteness, and that is, I get freed up for my own being in accepting death as my own most possibility. See, death is one's own most, and it's not to be outstripped. For Heidegger, death isn't the death of the factical death. It's not the death of the deathbed. It's the death of the being toward death, of the way that a person, in disclosing their own death to themselves, discloses how they are time, and as time, they are, that is the being of Dasein. If let's go back to the non-Dasein beings. Okay, again, I know I'm all over here, Karen, I'm very sorry. So I have this as a tool, as a readiness to hand, or at-handedness, so says Stambaum. the tool then breaks down and it gets disclosed as an object. See, now for Heidegger, again, when the hammer gets disclosed as broken, the brokenness of the hammer, that is the thin crack that allows me to see its unserviceability to my task, it's not a property that's predicated. See, now you were talking about your familiarity with analytic philosophy. See, this is a key issue that I think analytic philosophers have latched onto, which is, yeah, the brokenness isn't a property of the hammer. No, what happens is as Dasein, I project possibilities upon it, and my ability to project possibilities upon it are what discloses it as a broken hammer. But for Heidegger, this really means that many non-Dasein beings, particularly tools and objects, their being is related to Dasein's being because Dasein can project possibilities upon things, right? Again, this is part of because Dasein is ecstatical temporality, not just time and change, but an Dasein is a retaining that awaits. It's an elongated stretch. It's a clearing of appropriations. So what happens is I look down and I see the hammer is broken. And what happens then is basically the Cartesian worldview, and this is what Heidegger's railing against. Descartes sort of makes it seem that there are two kinds of substances out there. There's basically material substance that has extension as its basic characteristics, and then there's some sort of mind stuff, some sort of cognitive material. I guess material isn't the right word. There's, again, mind stuff that isn't, properly speaking, of the same order as the material stuff, right? And I think Heidegger he's saying, well, Descartes gets into this problem of thinking the world is a bunch of material, and then like the consciousness objectively stands before it and then predicates it as if the world were made of objects having certain characteristics or certain properties or qualities. And it's this detached gazing before the things that Descartes kind of begins with, which for Heidegger, that's an emergent phenomena. And what happens is we take the phenomena of the way non-Dasein beings disclose themselves during moments of breakdown and then act as if that were the primary mode of our own being in the world. And it's not. It's not at all, right? That when I weigh this on a scale, or when I say that it's made of plastic of this kind of density, now I'm dealing with the object at hand, right? This is the present before us. The object, again, as it would be understood in the laboratory. And Heidegger is trying to show that, again, so non-Dasein beings, non-living, right, non-Dasein beings have two kinds of being. That is, their readiness to hand or the present at hand. They have a sort of objective quality that we can weigh and measure and objectively assess the properties of, but they're also tools and utensils in that they have certain properties as with whiches of our in order to and for the sake of which. So as they get incorporated into our projects, they disclose other kinds of, their being, for Heidegger, the being of the object is a different being. That is, the cup, as I'm drinking from it, has a different kind of being than the cup as a mere object before me. See, now later Heidegger is going to get he's going to problematize that very distinction and go into the work of art and the problem of the standing reserve and all this kind of stuff. But, okay, maybe that's enough of a backdrop for some of it. So, in his critique of Descartes, what he's saying is that, Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. But Descartes then postulates, again, this sort of consciousness or this inner substance, and that's removed from extension or the world of materiality. And I think Heidegger wants to come along and say, no, that's not, you're not going to be able to come at it that way because Descartes hasn't satisfactorily addressed what Heidegger's going to call the worldhood of the world. Yeah, the worldhood of the world is being presupposed or sort of assumed in Descartes. That is, Descartes almost is imagining an objective presence of things just there, but he's not realizing that's an imagination of those things. You see? For Heidegger, the worldhood of the world is what we should be interested in, and it's Dasein as being in the world, which worlds the world. That is, you are the way the world worlds itself, and you world the world by your very headlessness. See, that's why I think he's using the word there here, or Dasein. Dasein is a much better word than the human, because if you use the word human, it's so subject to anthropomorphic or to zoological classification. It's very reductive, and it maybe misunderstands what the being of the human is. I think it makes it seem like there is a world that's there, and then there are people that are populating it, and then I'm just one more person among other people. This is what he wants to critique. He wants to say, no, Dasein is the very worldhood of the world, which means that I'm thrown into the world. Now, thrown means by the time I come to myself, I'll find that I've always already begun. And when I merge to self-awareness, I've always already engaged in practices. By the time I find myself, I'm already embedded and lost in das Man. I'm lost in the they self. And death then becomes a principle of individuation to pull me out of that everydayness, that sense in which I'm just one more person in the world among others who happens to be in a world that's sort of there independent of me. I think Heidegger's going, no, right? The world, you don't want to think by world. Heidegger means something like earth as a present at hand object. He doesn't mean an object that you're predicating. World exists. Okay, let's get at exists. For Heidegger, the word existence is unique to Dasein. Only Dasein exists. Animals don't exist for Heidegger. For Heidegger, animals live. Living is the proper verb of being for the animal. For Heidegger, this cup neither exists nor it lives. It's an extant. Extant is its being. And so, Heidegger will get at, again, there's non-Dasein beings which have, as extants, they have readiness to hand or presence at hand. Animals have living. Animals don't die for Heidegger. No, they don't die, and in that sense, they don't die because they can't get called out of their installment in the world to realize they are the very temporality by which the world worlds itself. See, I think the animal isn't... Again, see, the problem of animal comes, it's so much better in the lectures of Heidegger. I mean, if you read, for example, fundamental concepts of metaphysics or basic problems of phenomenology, where he gets into some of these lectures that were given right around the time of being in time, but a little bit later, he talks a lot more about the problem of animal and animal consciousness and what he calls disinhibiting rings, the degree to which animals can open to the world around them. But I do think it's important to say that for Heidegger, animals don't die. No, they suffer biological cessation. There is a loss of biological vitality and they dissipate back into the ground. But dying for Heidegger is being toward death. And being toward death is the mode of living of individuated, authentic Dasein. When Dasein discovers itself and recovers its own most potentiality for being, in recognizing that no one else can die for me and that I can't postpone my decisions indefinitely because I will die one day, I realize that the very world exists, right? Again, for Heidegger, it's very important to know that the world exists. The world is not an extant. It's not just an object before us that can be predicated. We can do that, but it's not Dasein's kind of being. Dasein as temporality is the way that, I guess, possibilities get projected upon extants, and they could be predicated or they could be used as a tool, right? So I realized that that was all over the place. I hope that that helps, Karen. I mean, I think one last way to say it is, it has to do with the way a temporal being can find itself out of its throe, and then when it finds itself, it's kind of lost in an anonymity, but as it calls back to itself from its own death, it realizes its utter non-substitutability with other people, and then authentically becomes itself. Okay, so thanks.